Hey residents of MeepleTown, welcome back to a MeepleTown mini review. Today we're going to be looking at Expeditions from Stonemaier Games. This is a follow-up game from the Scythe universe that actually plays in some ways pretty similar. But basically you are going to be moving your mech around to these different tiles and taking actions. Now the actions are pretty simple. You're going to move your cube, and whatever open spots are available for you to be able to take, you're going to take those. And there's only 3 actions available, so you can either move or gather or play a card from your play area, from your hand. And that's it. That's all you're going to do on your turn. But what you want to do is to be able to get all your stars out. You want to be able to get points. You want to be able to get coins. That's how you're going to win the game. And there's lots of different ways to do that. You can really, kind of like Scythe, focus on different areas. You can focus on getting lots of different cards. You can focus on getting the different meeples that you have. And these meeples help you because they're also going to allow you to be able to give you boost on the cards that you play, assuming that the color matches up with that card that you're playing. You can go around and remove these different corruption tokens from the board. You're basically going out and fighting evil. You can do that to be able to get your star out. You can, let's see, what else can you do? There's lots of different things that you can do to be able to get those stars out, putting your cards on the side, putting your cards at the top or the bottom, giving you different bonuses as the game goes on. Now, the feel of this game kind of feels similar to Scythe in that your turns are very quick. But there's a lot of different things that you can be doing, even though you are doing the same things essentially every turn, or kind of every other turn you're doing some of the same actions. But the way that plays out differently. The cards that you're going to be drafting from the board are going to determine the strategy that you're going to take throughout the game. When you decide that you're going to lock these cards into different positions onto your board instead of being able to play them from your hand, that's going to change up your strategy. Questing, which is really cool. So getting a card that matches a number, then going to that location and questing, and then locking that card into your board. Now, all of that is interesting because you do have to make a decision. Do I want to lock this card into the different sides of my board, or do I want to keep it because I really love taking the actions that are available to that whenever I take the play action? So that's a pretty interesting thing going on as well. Now, the game feels similar to Scythe, and so I guess I want to talk about that quickly in this mini review. But do I need to have both of these games? Is there a place for both of these games because they do play so similarly? I would say yes, and I'll say that whenever I get to my final, pass, play, purchase category. But I would say this has a different place in your collection if you really like Scythe, and if you don't mind, if you don't really want to have that conflict, if you don't want to have those battles that you have in Scythe. Now, one of the things in Scythe is that you have these battles that are going on, but there's a lot of Cold War action going on where it's not necessarily beneficial to just jump into war, but you might want to just kind of have a threat of war so that you can keep people at bay, but also not spend all of your resources to go to battle, because then somebody else will swoop in behind you and wipe you out. That doesn't happen in this game because you don't have that conflict with the other players. In fact, what I'm doing has very little to do with what you're doing other than blocking spots and taking different cards. We're kind of doing our own thing. So for me, I like that, but I also like the conflict in Scythe. It just depends on what your play preference is going to be. Do you like a lot of conflict? Then maybe you go with Scythe and stick with that. If you don't want the conflict, if you want all the other things of the action selection and the resource management and all that sort of thing, then this might be more of the game that you're looking for. And I say resource management. There is resource management. That's not necessarily the same focus as it is even in Scythe. But you do have two resources that you have to manage, as well as the coins that you're spending and keeping for the end of the game. So which one do I prefer, I guess, is the question. Well, if you know me, you know that Scythe is one of my top 5 favorite games of all time. I love it. I love everything about it, the conflict and the action selections, all of that. So I was a little concerned if I needed to have Expeditions in my collection, and I'm going to keep Expeditions just because I do think it has a different flavor, I guess. And in some ways, because you don't have that conflict, I might even prefer Expeditions at a lower player count. I've played this solo, I've played 2, I've played 4 players. I wouldn't really necessarily, 3 I think is kind of the sweet spot in this game. I wouldn't want to go more than that, but 2 is really well done too. And in fact, I might even prefer Expeditions at 2-player over Scythe just because of that conflict aspect of it, although you can throw in the different Automa cards, and that might be something that you want to do. For me, if I'm playing 2 players, I'd probably go with Expeditions. So as you can gather, if Scythe was a top 5 game for me of all time, or is a top 5 game of all time, Expeditions is a purchase because of all of those things that I've talked about, but it gives you the feel. Now, that's one thing I didn't really talk about. Scythe, there's something about the feel of Scythe that I have that makes me feel so very tense the entire time I'm playing. I always feel like I'm playing from behind. I always feel like, oh, somebody else has more stars out there than I do, and I can't move fast enough because I'm only able to take one action at a time. I still really get that feel in Expeditions in exactly the same way, and I love that aspect of it, minus the conflict aspect of it. Now, if I have a negative for it, it is that the game goes too long, and you can say that about Scythe too, but Expeditions, if you're playing at a higher player count, especially, even though the turns can go fast, you're only doing one thing, and it might take you several turns around the board to be able to do the one thing that you want to be able to get done. And that can be a frustrating experience for some people. For me, I don't mind it because there's just enough time for me to figure out what I'm going to do on my next turn. And again, that tension stays there the entire time. So for me, again, this is a purchase. Really love Expeditions. Can't wait to see what comes out in the future. I'd love to see more cards. I'd love to see more setup and variability on the board setup. But as is, I think this is a fantastic game, and there's a lot of replayability in it. So that is going to do it for this mini review of Expeditions, again, a purchase. Thanks for coming down to MeepleTown. Thanks for joining us, and thanks to our Patreon supporters for making content like this possible. If you would like to become a Patreon supporter, go to patreon.com/MeepleTown. To follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, find us at MeepleTown Games. Finally, to connect with us and other residents of MeepleTown, you can join Guild 3407 at BoardGameGeek.com. Until next time, thanks for coming down to MeepleTown.